Let's go ahead and call to order the CDC meeting. The first thing we have today is a public presentation. Mrs. Brian Scott.
I'm going to ask Emily to pull up the packet item on this. This is a preliminary site development plan for 5438 Johnson Drive. You may know this as the property in the northeast corner of Johnson and Knoll, where the Pride Cleaners is currently at. So, yeah, just go down to that. The item, they should have the site plan in there. So the property itself is about 11,000 square feet, just a little under a quarter of an acre, or a little over a quarter of an acre. The building itself right now is, I think, 1,400 square feet. It's obviously a Pride Cleaners retail outlet. My understanding is that Pride Cleaners tends to close it. They have, I thought they already had, but the owner informed us that they still utilize that building. But they're intending to close it. The building was built in 1950, so there's not really much use for the building for any other type of use. The owners of the property, JKM Equities, is interested in developing the site. They don't have a, you go back one, they don't have a specific tenant lined up yet. So what they're wanting to do is kind of develop a building that they could essentially entice a tenant with, if you will. So it's kind of an investment opportunity. But they want to build a building that's going to pretty much take up the entire site. So it'd be 4,420 square feet. They would go ahead and comply with the guidelines of Johnson Drive by having it up close to the sidewalk. There would be the 8-foot sidewalk easement that aligns what we currently have in front of Sully's Pub, some of the other buildings to the east and the west. There would be on-street parking on both Johnson Drive as well as Knoll. There would be 4 spaces of off-street parking in the back. They would actually tear down that fence that's there right now, clear out all that brush, widen that alleyway a little bit. There would be a privacy fence along the back of the property line to provide some sense of privacy.
And what, Brian, what's to the north up there?
That's a single-family home. So it's actually zoned MS2. That's a single-family home. And the owners of that home did come to the Planning Commission meeting that night.
And did they raise concerns at all?
They were a little bit concerned about it. They do understand that.
The height, or?
I think it's more that something's going to happen there. Yeah, they're not sure yet if it's going to be a 2-story building or a 1-story building. If they can find the right tenant mix, it might be a 2-story with obviously retail on the ground floor and then offices or apartments on the 2nd floor. Given the size of the building and requirements for an elevator and so forth, that would be a pretty expensive proposition for a 2-story building. So I find it might be a bit of a challenge for them to build something there. 2-story that is, but it's doable. But in any sense, the architects and the owner want to have a sense of presence at that corner. So that's why they're proposing the taller building at 28 feet.
Were there any issues raised by the Planning Commission that, because we don't have access to the minutes, in terms of environmental remediation, things like that?
One of the proposals that you saw in your packet was that they have a phase 1 environmental study done. Commissioner Torpedo wanted some specific language about that phase 1 and some of the standards and requirements that be in that study. The rest of the Planning Commission was not really comfortable going into that level of detail. They just wanted to be more general in that phase 1 study is required, and that dictates a phase 2 study would be necessary for that site, which I'm sure that's, in fact, the owners stipulated during the public hearing that they've done both phase 1 and phase 2, because it is a dry cleaners. It is on the brownfield list for remediation with the KBHE. So Evidence of those studies will be fine for me.
Brian, is the plan by the owners to tear down the building that's there now and then wait until they've got a tenant before they build so that they'll know how to do the
No, I don't think they're gonna do
layout of
anything.
the building?
I think what they're gonna do is, once they receive approval of the PDP, they're gonna wait. And they're just gonna wait till they have a tenant in place, and then when that tenant is in place, they'll go back with the final development plan and fine tune their plan.
Okay.
Then they'll proceed with demolition and construction. So if this is approved by you all, it may be a while before we see anything happen on that site.
Are they gonna request financial backing or anything?
They haven't mentioned that yet, and I don't think this would qualify. It's too small a project.
I'd be interested once we get that environmental assessment, because dry cleaners are known for carbon tetrachloride, which is a Class A carcinogen, and I'd kind of like to see what it looks like.
Any other questions?
I'm a citizen of Mission. Am I
You
allowed
want to
to
go
ask
ahead
a
and stand
question?
up and say your name and address, please?
Yeah, my name is Kathleen Pinkham, 6212 Hodges. And I just wanted to ask Brian, who do you represent?
I'm the Assistant City Administrator.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So, yeah, and thank you for your questions about remediation. Those are my questions of the dry cleaner. I don't know if they clean there or not, but it's a big deal.
They clean over at Broadmoor, don't they?
They do,
I
again.
don't think they do.
Yeah,
They did
I
go
kind
up
of think they
there,
don't
yeah.
either.
It's not to say they
It's a
got it
big
at
deal.
some point.
Yeah.
My understanding is back in the day, there was actually a gas station. So there may be some dirty
Even
tanks
worse.
and so
Even
forth.
worse.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have a sign-in sheet?
So do we want to put this on consent agenda or?
This is a discussion item, but I
Head right on.
think it's, is this going to the next council meeting?
Yes, it'll be on the 19th, yeah.
Okay.
Not a discussion item.
No. There'll be an action presentation by the planning
That's
commission.
right, that's right, okay.
Planning commission
That's
action item.
correct.
All right, thank you, Maureen.
No, it isn't.
All right, we do have an action item, a couple of action items. The next one is 52nd Street, mill and overlay, John Belger. And John, thank you so much for all your service. I'm going to really miss working with you.
Thank you.
Here, here.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you giving a 26-year-old kid the opportunity 8 years ago to come out here and do all kinds of cool stuff. And like I tell everybody that I talk to, I hope I've left Mission a lot better than I found it. And I'm confident that I have, but I hope you all see it that way too. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Kristen, this action item is just for you. 52nd Street, Illinois. As many of you recall, back in 2016, we chip sealed this section of 52nd Street right off of Lamar. Over the past few years, it became very apparent that that treatment was probably not going to last in this area because of the heavy truck traffic and garbage trucks trying to turn around. So what we've done is we went out and solicited bids to have this street section mill and overlaid. Little Joe's Asphalt was the lowest, most responsible bidder at $64,442.65. Yep, I was kind of amazed that the three bids were within $3,500 of each other, so it seems like everybody was all right in the same range.
Fair.
Right,
That's
so
a good thing.
Little Joe's has done our mill and overlay program for the past 3 years now, and they've always done a really good job and been responsive to anything that we've had issue with and make sure to get it remedied. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
The only question I have is in regards to that sidewalk to nowhere.
Yes.
Did we really, I don't think that sidewalk needs to be replaced.
Okay.
Which, you know, that's like $5,000.
So probably what we would do is issue a change order saying just remove the sidewalk and replace it with topsoil and sod.
Perfect. Because
may-
there's no connectivity there, it's just in front of like 4 houses and,
Right. So, I mean, if that's something you all felt comfortable with, we could, like I said, do that by change order. You might end up trading dollars just to get the topsoil and the sod back,
Right.
but, you know, like you said, there's not a whole lot there. It's sporadic.
Is there a possibility for a sidewalk in the future that would connect?
There'd be a lot of work to do that. There's some stormwater stuff, some utility stuff in the way that you'd have to get moved out of the way. There's no real ramp that lines up with 52nd Street to get you across the street. Not saying that it couldn't be done, but I think that if you ended up wanting to do that at a later date, it wouldn't be. I think if you wrapped it up all in one sidewalk program or something, you might be able to, you know, do that at a relatively affordable cost. It would just be having to get around some of that stormwater stuff and utilities. Utilities probably have to move on that.
Is there a reason that those neighbors there, the 4 houses you said that over there, that they would want a sidewalk?
I talked to them and they don't want it.
You did talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they don't, it doesn't really go anywhere and, yeah.
Did it at one time? Why is that sidewalk there?
I don't know, it's weird.
There's just a stretch that connects about, like Kristen said, about 3 or 4 houses on the south side of the street.
But it doesn't go to the street, I mean, to like Lamar, it just.
Right. It's kind of in the middle.
I want
It is,
sidewalks.
yeah, it's strange.
That's what I was wondering, if maybe just those residents wanted it for some reason.
Because the kids learn how to ride bikes.
Skateboard. So they don't have to do it in the street. I don't know, but anyway, that's about, before we jump, you've already talked.
Yeah.
So do you want this to go on consent?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
You recommending that, Ken?
Yes.
And then John, 2018, oh, any other questions besides that? And it's going to the consent?
And what's the schedule for this?
So the contract will get approved at the council meeting on the 19th. And then after the contracts get signed, they have 60 days to get that work done.
But what do you care till we go?
Still care. I don't want to leave anybody in a mess.
I'm sure he'll come visit.
We know we're good.
I was going to say, I'm sure,
We'll find you.
I'm not changing my phone number or anything, so you guys know where to find me.
I got you on speed dial.
All right, up next is John again with the 2018 concrete repair.
Thank you very much. Also part of the 2018 street program, this project would take care of those 2 deteriorated sidewalks that connects Highlands Elementary School to Cedar. That came out of our Safe Routes to School study as something that was pretty high priority to give the kids an opportunity and a route to make it back and forth from the neighborhood to the school. This would also fix the ADA ramp at 60th and Row. There have been a lot of issues with truck traffic coming up and coming around that corner and cutting through Kevin Clune's yard and destroying those panels on that corner. So what this would do is actually move that curb radius back to give those trucks an opportunity to make that corner without ramping over the ADA ramp and Kevin's yard right there. We had Olson design that and do all the radius and turning studies to make sure that that would be within right of way and work as it's designed. The contract is with Phoenix Concrete, an amount of $64,466.21. Happy to.
4-4 is a going price.
Man, I guess it's.
You've had work with them before.
Phoenix actually bid on Fox Ridge. They were second lowest to Kansas Heavy, but they've been around for a long time. It used to be Miller Paving. Went through a ownership change, so name change too. But
Where are they located?
I'd have to look. I'm not exactly sure where they're stationed out of.
They're local, right?
They're local, yeah. They're in the metro.
I say take it, consent.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect.
Thank you.
157th Terrace, Olathe, Kansas.
Olathe.
Olathe.
Yeah, it's on their AIA document.
The next item we have is granting a utility easement to Mission Apartments.
So, many of you probably have noticed that on the north side of the community center property, there is a power line that goes across. The developers for Mission Apartment Complex, the Mission Trails Apartment Complex, will be tapping into that power line to provide power to their building. And they would actually like to bury that power line. So kind of an opportunity to get out of the way, make a more aesthetically pleasing environment for both their building and ours. So we need the grant and utility easement to do that.
Whose property is the utility line on now?
Ours, yeah, the city's. So this would be the instrument to do that. So with your approval, you'd be granting utility easement to them across our property. That would allow them to bury the line and access in the future if they would need it to.
I think that would look very nice.
Yeah, that was the one that they hit while we were doing the ribbon cutting the other day.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah, there's
Turned out the power.
a line from that main line that goes across the parking lot over to the bar. And they want to remove that because it hangs real low.
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, there's a dump truck going through the side. It's
Wow.
bed up and just knocked off that line.
Is there any drawback at all to granting this?
No.
Okay. Then why get it? Not a lot of discussion needs to be had.
Yeah.
The goal is to have them all buried at one point.
Yes.
Oh, was it?
It's expensive to do that.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Good job.
Because we wanted that to go to consent then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next item we have our discussion items. John Belger on the updated Broadmoor reconstruction project.
I'm back.
Hey.
First and foremost, let me say thank you for everyone who came to the meeting and participated in that. I think we really got some good feedback from all the folks that attended. A little more calm this time. Thank you, Emily, for looking at my exhibits. So, back in the spring, we had an open house where we presented the initial conceptual design for Broadmoor. That conceptual design came from a design that was originally put together by Olson back in 2011, which included a lot of the on-street parking concepts, wide sidewalks, things of that nature. When we had that meeting, there was a lot of concerns from the property owners about how drastically that corridor would be changed by that project. What they have now is their private parking lot areas that they own and control would turn into on-street public parking, which was the main concern. So what we did is we got with Olson. Here, leave it there. Back. So here's your initial design. That included a lot of the on-street parking, as you can see. You know, Mission Pet Mart, the furniture store. You know, you converted their parking lots basically to on-street parking with sidewalks. You know, sidewalks leading up to the entry doors. It also, you know, put on-street parking along the east side in front of a lot of these businesses, including the veterinarian, where he has right now is kind of an asphalt parking lot where his employees come park, and then folks can double park behind them. That would change his to, you know, on-street parking with your sidewalk, and again, your sidewalk leading to the door. Some of the parcels remain unchanged. The main reason for that is they already meet the city code for driveway widths, driveway separations. So areas like Pride Cleaners wouldn't change a whole lot. Popeyes would be relatively unaffected by this. But like I said, during that open house, there was a lot of pushback as far as, you know, how drastically we were changing the corridor. So what we did is we went back to Olson and said, hey, let's take another look at this. Let's try to leave it closer to the way it looks now, but still accomplish some of the main goals that we have, which is, you know, a path for pedestrians along each side of the road, kind of cleaning up some of the curb lines, and getting the road reconstructed, because as many of you probably know, that section of the street is in poor condition. I forgot to mention on the previous plan and this one, the traffic signal at Broadmoor and Johnson Drive would be replaced. We would take that island on the northwest corner where you kind of have that ramp situation getting onto Johnson Drive from southbound Broadmoor, move that island over and make it a more traditional right turn lane, try to get some folks to slow down. But in this new plan, as you guys can see, we kind of kept it closer to what's out there now. There are still some areas that don't meet city code, but what we did was try to not make the situation any worse than it already was, which I think that we accomplished. Some of these areas that have the, you know, wide parking areas or drive approaches, we've been talking to Olson about delineating a path through there that would act as a sidewalk. So make the grades the way they're supposed to be, and then use some sort of traffic striping or markings to delineate that sidewalk. So like crosswalk striping, things of that nature. That way,
But it wouldn't be an actual sidewalk?
wouldn't be an actual.
Road?
It would not be an actual sidewalk, so it would be part of the approach into the buildings. But it would meet all the cross-slope regulations of ADA, things of that nature, and it would be clearly delineated where it was. The thought behind that is, and I think the approach that we took was, with businesses that are there that are existing, it's really hard to have that big turnover. So in the past, where we've had, you know, the Cornerstone Commons, the Mission Crossings, and things of that nature, that kind of took a big area and redid the entire area. So when you have projects like that, your ability to put on-street parking or the wide sidewalks is a lot more well-received, because you're changing the entire footprint. With this, we're trying to retrofit improvements into a district that's already existing with buildings that aren't changing at all, which makes that complicated. You know, I was asked a really good question about the properties down at Petmore and the furniture store. You know, they say, can you provide a drive entrance that meets city code, but still leave more of a parking lot style parking area for them? The problem you have is the buildings are pushed up so close to the street, by the time you get the approach and the sidewalk in, you don't have enough room to navigate to get into parking spots. So we tried to, I feel like this concept is kind of a drastic swing. The issue that we had is the middle ground just wasn't really there. So I want you guys to know that we did try to, you know, find a happy medium or meet the middle spot. It's just the way things were laid out made it really difficult to do that. Yeah.
I guess I had both a substantive question and then a procedural question. So the substantive one is, we've talked a lot about the concerns that have been expressed by the businesses. I think a bunch of us were at, you know, either or both of the open houses. But could you talk a little bit about the reasons for the code in the first place, and the connectivity, you know, the reasons for the code that we did implement that does apply to this area?
You know, and I'm just going to talk about regular city code.
Sure.
I'm not super well versed in the West Gateway form-based code. And Brian, I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about that or better than I can. you know, your regular city code for driveway widths and, you know, distances off property lines is to kind of control where traffic goes. You want to try to keep it contained as much as you can. One of the things is a perfect example. It's, you know, down here through where Pet Mart and the Furniture Mall is, when you have a sidewalk and you have a parking lot, your main goal is to separate the cars and the pedestrians. So the way I look at that is, if you had a 35-foot wide drive approach, that keeps those cars funneled in that approach. When you kind of have what you have here, it's the cars can kind of come and go as they please. I mean, things like that are kind of why we have those types of codes.
So it's not best practices for pedestrian safety or things like that to have it set up this way?
I would say it's not the ideal condition.
Okay.
You know, the counter to that we heard in a lot of the meetings was, it's always been that way, and we've never had a problem. And, you know, so I understand it both ways. My biggest thing is we're trying to come up with a project that works for everybody. And like I was saying earlier, being able to do a total revamp is a lot easier when you have property assembled, building footprints change, things get pushed back. That's why a lot of the setbacks and stuff that are in the code would happen if the property actually turned over. The issue we're running into here is we're trying to redo the street with those types of improvements, and then the buildings don't move and meet those types of setbacks. So I feel like our hands are kind of tied when it comes to that piece. And honestly, I think both concepts are doable. I can say with confidence after the open house the other night, I think that the business owners would be way more receptive to the second one. Because it gets the street fixed. It does improve pedestrian walkability by getting good sidewalks through there. And while some of those things aren't to the level that we would like them to be, I still think it's an improvement over what's there.
And you and I talked too about if the building does go down, it gets redeveloped, that the developer most likely would go ahead and have to probably finance or, you know, pay for to get it to code.
But the code applies to both existing developments and a complete redo, right? So why would you make an exception for one and not the other? Or why would new developers be held to it, I guess?
The form-based code really applies to new development that occurs in that area.
Okay.
So Kristen's right in that if one of those buildings was to be demolished and a new structure built there, you would have to meet the form-based code, which would be built up to the sidewalk with on-street parking, you know, very pedestrian-oriented structure. That was really the whole vision behind the form-based code West Gateway study, was
let's back to that
to kind of move away from this auto-oriented environment that's existed there for probably 50 years or more to a pedestrian-oriented environment where people can walk from point A to point B and leave their car behind.
And if there was a one-off with, say, one new building, but not, you know, complete new block, would they be able to fit those new requirements into the second plan, or would they encounter issues with that?
I think that if a parcel came down, you would have to, if the building actually came down, they would probably move the building at that time, based on the form-based code. So then you could potentially, at that time, have that parcel converted over into something closer to what this is. So say for some reason, Chad and Leland sell their buildings to someone. Somebody assembles this piece of property, takes those buildings down. What would probably happen is this building face, per the West Form-Based Code, stop me if I go completely off the rails on this. The building face would get pushed up further to the street.
Yeah.
So then you'd have your on-street parking, your sidewalks, and you wouldn't have this no man's land.
So you'd have a jigsaw puzzle potentially, where you could have a building in the middle of the street, redone to form-based code and everything around it in this whole
Exactly.
system.
Potentially you could.
That could happen, absolutely.
I think when the form-based code was developed, it was developed with the vision that somebody would come along and assemble property. And that's a challenge now
Right.
in our environment. In the
Expensive.
domain or lack of.
Yeah.
This is also primarily, the focus is paving and getting new street
Right.
and curb. I mean, that's what the primary function of this
For now,
plan has
correct.
been.
Yeah.
And we've tried to adapt the form-based code to it, which is fine, but,
I think you also have to look at what we have presently and what potentially could be there in the future.
right.
To be real honest, I am very into pedestrian-oriented districts, but almost every one of these requires a car based on the service they provide.
Right.
Furniture, you can't pick up furniture and walk with it. And most people that are pushing the pets have to bring their pets in a car of some kind.
Sure.
Almost every one of those is vehicle-oriented,
That's a good
the service, so.
Yeah. Can you repeat what you were saying about the island? Is that in the next project?
No, during this project, and I tried to get it shown on the exhibit, but we never quite got there because they're actually working through a couple of things. So your traffic signal at Johnson and Broadmoor's here.
Right.
So on the northwest corner, you have this triangle-shaped island where your right turn lane comes up and basically takes a ramp onto Johnson Drive.
Right.
So what this design would do is take this island and essentially move it back to where that curb line was more out here
Okay.
and give you a more traditional right turn lane.
So it's going to mirror the other corners.
Right. So you
That's
still have
feet across.
a left turn, a straight a through lane, and then you have a right turn. So, but instead of taking that ramp, it would be more traditional right turn.
Is there anything being done with the sidewalk on that side?
There would have, yes. So in here, we would have to do some improvements. Actually, there's a storm box right here that would end up having to get moved out. So they redo that stormwater infrastructure there. And actually, there's a pipe that runs here and then over to here. So we're going to redo all that stormwater, traffic signal, move that island back, fix that
So
intersection.
that's in preparation basically for when you do Johnson Drive.
Right.
And then we also talked a little bit at the open house about the AT&T manholes that are right there too. And I think that you told me that you were going to call somebody or...
I've called twice the maintenance department. They say they're going to fix it. The problem that you have with AT&T manholes is they're proprietary. So the size of them is, it's like 28 or 29 inches.
Right through here.
Where a regular manhole is 23 and a half or 24. So I've called and requested that they fix those manholes, and they keep telling me that they've sent it to maintenance, and I keep bothering maintenance and say, maintenance, I need you to really fix those manholes like you told me you were going to. What we had done previous with last year's mill and overlay program is fix the pavement around those manholes, but it still didn't fix the lid being down in the casting of the manhole. So
What would they be doing to fix it, to bring it up to that?
they would actually have to remove those castings and reinstall. Is what they've essentially said. They said that they may have a lid that may fit in there better. So
Can we modify your contract so that you can't leave until next day?
Contingency.
Trap.
if you want to talk to Laura and see if she can put a retainer maybe. No. But I'll keep asking and do my best to get a solid answer.
What's your last day, John?
September 21st.
I had a procedural question too, and this might
Sure.
be more for Brian. So my understanding is that these are two alternate proposals, not a superseding proposal. And so when this moves forward, how will that work in terms of what plan we're voting on? Are we taking a vote on both, or what are we looking at?
I think,
Looking for direction.
I think what would happen is we would put together an action item that would be basically setting forth the preliminary design plan. So at that time, it would be, we've got plan 1, plan 2. I would imagine that staff would say, this is the plan we would recommend.
Okay, so it's a staff recommendation.
Right, and then based off of that, you know, if there was discussion and you all wanted to go a different way.
But this plan currently, as you presented it, has been accepted by those who pushed back.
They were way more receptive to the second proposed plan than they were the first proposed plan.
I thought it was.
So you have proposal 1, proposal 2, and let me clarify, neither one is the plan. So you have both options. As a conceptual design, it would be your all's decision on how you want to move forward with preliminary design.
Well, timing-wise, for the actual project to move forward with the CAR's approval, et cetera, it has to be done
So,
soon for next year.
yep,
And what's the cost differential between the two plans?
we don't have cost estimates for the second proposal. Based off of what's the differences between the two. The second one would be a cost savings because it would not go into all the depth of redoing a lot of things and acquiring easements and things of that nature. It would stay in the closer to the same footprint that's out there right now.
Were the remaining concerns still, or is there still talk about the number of workers?
I think there was still a concern about parking, mainly driven by some of the businesses that either have a lot of employees or generate a lot of traffic.
That's why we still are in our same hands for
The on-street parking. Because the on-street parking is first come, first served public parking, just like it is down on Johnson Drive. In the second proposal, it kind of keeps it the same way that it is now, so they would control their own parking.
So this was a CARS project for 2019, is that correct?
Yes.
So when do we have to, when does this become an action item for us? Is staff going to make a recommendation between the two projects, it sounds like, is that correct?
This fall, or the standing schedule.
Then will it come back to the CDC or will it go directly to council?
Yeah. Staff makes a final recommendation, it'll come back to CDC, and then it'll go to City Council
Okay.
And I would anticipate that's going to be
by October.
October,
Okay,
because I know that they'll want to get moving on that.
absolutely.
That way you can get designed, get bid, get all through that process, and then come next construction season, it's get going.
We can only
We don't have a firm handle on which way staff's going to recommend right now.
I think that's why we wanted to talk to you guys tonight,
That'll give some
just
direction.
to
Looking for some direction from us.
see what you all's,
Because personally, I'm feeling like the second option would be, it's going to be the one that's most acceptable to them, the people that are actually running businesses there. And it may not be exactly the way we want it, but I don't think first option is exactly the way we want it either. So definitely think second option would be the way to recommend.
Should we take like a straw poll and kind of, okay.
General, sometimes.
Okay.
I mean,
I think it should be mentioned, the first option was fully codes compliant, correct?
That's correct.
The second option is not. So there's a difference,
right,
other than acceptance of the business owner.
sure.
and I think we should be giving consideration to our constituents more broadly as well in the city visioning process. And for that reason, I would be inclined towards the first plan, even though there is some pushback. I understand the concerns of the business owners, but I think, you know, the code was developed as part of a broader visioning process, and going one off and having kind of popcorn on this whole section seems less than ideal to me.
Just one of the main goals is pedestrian connection, and if we go ahead and go forward, you know, if a building gets knocked down, then we're going to be in a disconnect situation.
Right.
My worry is that if we had that kind of approach, then we probably should not have come up with Plan B.
Well, that ship has sailed. I'm just saying that is my view. It might only be my view, but that
So in
is-
regards to like Leland's building, can anybody park there?
No,
Okay, so he,
Leland controls that parking on his property. So his property line, you know, your existing right-of-way is the red line. The blue line is your proposed, so you go back a little bit just to make sure that everything tied in correctly. But his property line comes out, I mean, he owns that.
okay, so we would have to get easements on private property.
In order to do the first plan, you would have to get either right-of-way or permanent easement.
All right, but does that slow down the project substantially? I mean, I
It would slow it down because, you know, if you have
Exactly.
opposition and folks that don't care for that, I mean, it could potentially, depending on how you wanted to move forward, you know, it would kind of be the same thing that we had on Johnson Drive. It wouldn't be held to that stringent of a process because there's not federal dollars on that project, but you would still have to go through, do the appraisals, make offers, and if somebody was totally opposed to potentially eminent domain.
So that original plan, first plan, is completely compliant with the form-based code?
City code compliant. I
All
don't know
right.
if it's all form-based code though. I think it's more city code, right?
It's city
Yeah,
code, the form base is
Form-based
buildings,
kind of,
right?
form-based will kind of take you to another higher level, because if you look through that West form-based code, I mean, you're talking building new streets, you're talking, you know, reconfiguring, you know, a lot of buildings,
Breaking blocks.
things moving around.
Of all of the business
So you still have the same problem when the new business coming in. So it's not gonna change that. Well, I mean, if they tore it
It
down.
would fit with the sidewalk plan and all of that, I
The
think.
reality is that we do not have, it's not code compliant now.
It's not
So
now.
we'd be doing a multi-million-dollar project that is not compliant with current city code.
Darcy, did you have a question?
I was just wondering of the two, were any of the business owners or anyone who showed up to the meetings in favor of the first over the second?
No.
They're really protective of their parking. The parking is the biggest thing with
Yeah.
them. Because it goes,
The
you use the first lane, you're going to more public parking, and that's really disturbing.
It affects their business.
Absolutely.
Do you, on either plan, how many areas do we have sidewalks that are on the other side of the parking? So that if you back out, if somebody's walking by, there's a potential you could hit them.
We're gonna see all of those.
Right, all of those right there, yeah.
These
The
two,
entire street.
you know, you have drive entrances
You got the circle driving.
at some of these places to where, you know, you can still see, you know, this is a parking lot, you can still pull out. Again, Popeyes doesn't change that much because this is kind of the setup that they have now. They clean up this sidewalk, give them some green space, and we do a ramp up here at the corner. You know, the veterinarian kind of stays with the same, so you've got that potential there. K&H has their drive approaches. Susan has her drive approach and parking lot, and of course Johnny's has theirs. So where you have that potential is basically Pet Mart, Discount Furniture, and the vet.
And the hazard is no different from what we have on Johnson Drive.
Well, the thing that we have on Johnson Drive is the sidewalks in front of the parking.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have potential sidewalk behind the parking.
Okay.
So what would happen is these folks would still park in here. And even though we had that to where it met all the ADA cross slope and all those, and had some sort of delineation there to make people aware of that's where the sidewalk should be. You still have folks that, you know, you're walking behind cars.
Mayor, you really want us to go the original plan in terms of your own?
No, I think I agree with John. We're trying to retrofit it. I mean, ideally, yes, I would like Plan 1, but we are where we are. We've already shown Plan 2. If we're trying to retrofit a street into a district and we're trying to set the future,
Yeah.
and I don't know how well you're going to be able to integrate those two. The chances of someone coming along and buying that block and trying to redevelop it, probably not going to happen. I think this street does need to be done, so I don't think we can delay. So if we do decide to go with Plan 1, those property owners that are affected are not going to be happy. It's not going to be an easy process, I would guess, which means we probably miss our window for the CARS funding.
And that's
Or
basically
we take action.
the scenario we had last time, and CARS funds were not involved last time. Back in 2011, we took the first proposal to the business owners and basically got the same response that we got this time. A lot of the same business owners through there all have the same feelings. At that time, we had the Tiger Project coming up, Markway coming up, the development at Mission Crossing happening, and we said, okay, we're going to take this project, put it up on the shelf, get all these other things done first, you know, so you would have the on-street parking, the different development around you to understand how that was all going to shake out. And then when we took the first plan back, saying, okay, now that we've done all this, here's this plan back, what do we think of it now? It was pretty much all the same feelings.
So with that being said, do we want to go ahead and maybe give the city some direction, maybe take a vote between Plan 1 and Plan 2?
I think Plan 2 in general, because, you know, while we have the standard for the form-based code, we're trying to get to where we want to be. We've had other buildings like that car wash where we did modifications.
I want to make sure we're using the right terminology.
Yes.
This is not trying to comply with form-based code.
Right, correct.
This is trying to comply with city code, existing city code, not form-based code.
Straight city code.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's been out of city code for
Yes, it has.
ever.
Yes.
Right.
And so I'm sure there's some kind of legal caveat there where you come back, these businesses have been there for years, and now you're going to
Well, I think
affect their business by changing because you want to get in code. I think you're going to run into some problems there, which will hold up the project if you get.
I think we found a compromise that we can move forward with in a timely manner and get the job done. That is really the focus, is to get that street redone.
Right. I mean, I'm inclined to go with Plan number 2 as well, because of all those
Well,
things.
and I'll take full responsibility for proposal 2 because my feeling is this. When we took the same plan back that we had from 2011 back to the property owners in 2018, it was the same response. My biggest thing was I didn't want the same outcome. I didn't want to put it back on the shelf because we've gotten to the point now where we truly need to do something to that section of Rockport due to the condition it's in, due to the traffic signal being bad, and you know, it was another option to see if we could get it to move forward. Back in 2011, there were no CARS funds on that project. It was going to be a full-on city-funded project, and we got it put on the CARS list. You know, went through the process, and it connected Johnson Drive and Markway, so that was one of the stipulations to get it on there, and it met the daily traffic amounts that it needed to. So fortunately, you know, we got it on the list, and I'd hate to miss out on that.
Yeah, that's a substantial amount of money. What do you think, Pat? 2? solely.
I still say one. I mean, I understand all of the concerns about business owners, and I don't want to make light of that, but I think, we have to think about what we've already established as our code, and if we're talking about what's a multi-million-dollar project, to be redoing an entire section that's in a manner completely not compliant with existing code just seems not forward-thinking to me.
Debbie?
Reverse thinking, going with 2, because right now, the businesses we've had have been compliant with the city. They've been revenue generating. They've done everything in their power to keep business along that strip. And if we get a whole new cadre of business entities in there, I think that's maybe 10 years down the line. I think these people are here, and I think they were very vocal about what they, and it's not just what they want. If we have any way of balancing what 1 was with 2, I'm with 2.
RC?
I agree with all of the statements, but I would go with
2.
Well, let's do 2 it is.
So I guess we would recommend that staff takes it with option number 2. All right, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good discussion.
Absolutely. All right, the additional discussion item we have is the development projects update. Brian Scott.
I think Emily sent you all a photograph of me giving a building permit. Contractor, so.
Good job.
Yeah, so Gateway is officially underway. I got a meeting with the contractor and some of the subs tomorrow to talk about the permitting process and how we're going to coordinate that. The day after last week, the general contractor for Mission Trails came in and I gave them their building permit, so they are officially underway as well.
Are they Mission Trails or Mission Apartments? What do they be called?
The LLC is Mission Apartments, but the project is Mission Trails. That'll be the brand name that you see in front of the building that's up and running. I think at one time it was something else before you became Mission Apartments. So.
Where are we with the car wash demo?
Speaking of which,
That's a good question. I haven't talked to them in a while. I did talk with their architect earlier.
Department updates.
I don't have any department updates.
None? Then that concludes the CDC. Good job.
Yes.
What is that, 4 minutes early? Actually, 7.
extra minutes, huh?
Thank you, Brian.
We had technical difficulties during the meeting. I'm not sure. We heard there was audio but no video for a portion of that. Oh yeah, well, just so you know.
I'd say, yeah, move on.
Okay, good. We'll go ahead and move ahead, and I'll call the Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order. In the absence of Nick, I'm going to be chairing it as Vice Chair. And we have 4 action items that are on the agenda. I think we have a guest presentation as well, so I don't know which order you...
Yeah, let me just kind of tee this up. I'll introduce our guest speaker. So Mission Apartments is the investment group that's been formed by EPC, and they're the ones that are actually funding the development of the project, Mission Trails. We'll know the apartment there, 6201 Johnson Drive. The redevelopment agreement was approved about this time last year, and as part of that process, the developers asked for consideration of IRBs to receive a sales tax exemption. So that's the item that's before you tonight. We've kind of experienced this a couple times now. I know there were some questions about IRBs last time. So I thought it'd be good to have someone from our bond counsel, Gilmore Bell, here tonight. So Kevin Wimpy and Gary Anderson's here too. Gary snuck in behind me, so I'm not sure which one of you want to give the IRB 101. Is it Gary? Okay.
Gary,
So you all know Gary.
good to see you again.
Good evening, Gary Anderson. Most important news, I'm glad you're not going to screw up Popeyes for me. Made my evening, so. So I thought it'd be helpful, because I know we have some new folks, to talk a little bit about IRBs in general and then talk specifically about this potential action item. So as Brian said, in connection with this project, the development agreement provided incentives of tax increment financing and industrial revenue bonds for purposes of the sales tax exemption on construction materials and any personal property that's financed with the bonds. So what's become fairly customary is that developers ask for this incentive because it is a significant incentive. The good news is, from a local standpoint, most of the incentive is state sales tax, so you're giving away somebody else's money. You are giving away a little bit of your money, but it's primarily state sales tax that you are granting as an incentive. And almost every one of these deals is done in the following manner. Unlike when you guys issue bonds for finance Broadmoor improvements or Johnson Drive improvements, you issue bonds, the investors purchase those bonds and give you money. These industrial revenue bonds are not really a financing vehicle. They are a vehicle to obtain the incentive. So from a practical standpoint, what really happens is, and we'll use this project as an example, Mission Apartments will actually purchase the bonds. And they'll purchase the bonds with the money they borrow from whoever their lender is and whatever equity they're using. So basically they take money out of this pocket, they buy the bond, and then they put it back in this pocket. So it's basically a big circle. So there's really not a true financing. That's happening through their construction loan, their equity raise, wherever they get their money. And for big companies, and I'll just use Cerner as an example because we've done a number of these deals with Cerner. Cerner takes cash, they buy the bond, and then they put it back in their pocket all on the same day, and it's over with, but they achieve the same incentive. So the most important thing probably from the council standpoint is these are not obligations that the city has any liability for. The only source of repayment is payments made by the developer, which in effect they basically make to themselves. And this financing only stays in place during the construction and sort of lease-up period. So once it's built, all the construction bills are paid. Once they've purchased all their FF&E, whatever that may be, exercise equipment or whatever amenities they're going to have, then the bond issue terminates, and it terminates by the bondholder, which in this case is Mission Apartment, saying the deal's over, Mr. Trustee, here's the bond, cancel it. We do some fancy little paperwork to terminate the lease, and it goes away. So I think the most important thing to take away is this is a method to provide an incentive for the developer. The city has no risk with respect to the bonds. So with that kind of general overview of Bonds 101, maybe I'll stop there and see if you have any questions. Then we can just do a quick summary on the ordinance to authorize the bond for Mission Apartments. Yes, Councilor, you're going.
I've got a question. Is there really any loss to the city of Mission if they're not purchasing equipment and stuff in Mission?
You know, this is always a
losing any tax money.
Yeah, it's always a hard question because it's very difficult when they purchase materials not only outside the city, but they could be purchasing steel, for example, in another state.
Right.
There's probably a small loss because there probably would have been some things that would have been purchased in the city, you know, because, you know, they don't have, 50 screws they need right now. They'd run down to Mac or Hartman or something. But, it's probably insignificant because they're buying, great big quantities of materials that would not be, sourced here.
They would probably buy Popeyes and pay us some sales.
Well, that's true. Yeah. They would pay sales tax there.
Right off lunch. Okay. You had sent out there was a document that was forwarded to us from just general ideas, and there was a diagram.
A very colorful diagram.
Very colorful diagram. And it talked about, I guess, the lease versus the indenture side of things. Is that correct?
Yes,
So this is really an indenture?
yeah, so what happens from a mechanical legal standpoint is Mission Apartments will enter into what we call a base lease agreement. They'll lease the property to the city. The city immediately turns around and leases it back to them for payments on the bonds, which, remember, basically they pay themselves. And then there is a trust indenture entered into between the city and a bank, and that's where the money flows through. So it's a third party, independent, objective party. So money flows in and then immediately flows back out. So basically the money comes out of this pocket as the bond purchaser, and then they draw it back out to pay their contractor. So they're basically the pass-through.
So both aspects are involved?
Yes.
In
Yes.
this process?
And again, this is very customary, this incentive. You know, we spend a lot of time doing these all over the metropolitan area, all over the state of Kansas and Missouri. So it's very customary. And again, you know, there are things that we require in the documents because you will have a leasehold interest in the property. You know, let's say a construction worker gets injured on the job and somebody determines, hey, let's sue the city, maybe they can get some money out of them. So the developer is required to not only indemnify the city, but also to maintain property, casualty, and liability insurance that names the city as an additional insurer. And if for some reason they foul up the sales tax exemption, they're obligated to ultimately pay that to the state if they foul up the use of that. So again, no risk to the city.
And the reason why it's all wonky and requires a colorful chart is because it was originally intended for cities to get the sales tax exemption. Is that correct? And so it's flowing through the city for the developers to get the benefit?
Yeah, the exemption arises because of the involvement of the city as a political subdivision. The good news is in the old days, we actually had to transfer legal title to the city, which creates some other complications. But we got the law changed, so we don't have to do that anymore.
It's
So
almost
that's
like the
a
city
good thing.
stepping into the shoes of
Right.
the developer,
Yeah.
using its tax exemption ability.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. It's great.
So the action before you is the ordinance to authorize the issuance of the bonds for the Mission Trails, Mission Apartments, EPC, whatever the correct terminology is. And we would anticipate closing on those bonds in the next 30 days or so. As Brian said, I think they've pulled their building permit and they are ready to go.
So the draft ordinance is included, and that's really what we're moving along with the summary of the ordinances here.
Correct.
So I recommend that take it and do a consent or
Not consent.
discussion.
It'll go under issuance of
Yeah,
the bonds.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
The next item of business is a revision to the CID number 3 implementation date for the Gateway project, and I'll let Brian.
Okay. So the city council approved the establishment of Michigan Gateway Community Improvement District number 3 in October of 2017, almost a year ago to the day. This CID will establish a 1% sales tax above the current sales tax the city has just on retail activity that occurs within the district, which is essentially the site, 4801 Johnson Drive, the Gateway Development site. The ordinance at the time established that the CID, or the sales tax, would take effect January 1st, 2019. If that were to stay true, there would be no sales tax collected, because there's really nothing generating sales tax at this point. So the developers have asked that we extend that effective date to July 1st of 2020, and that's when phase 1 will be finished, pretty much finished, and that ground floor retail will be open, starting to generate sales tax. So this will kind of align with the development activity that's occurring there.
but we would be giving up a year and a half of sales tax at the end.
And
So why are we wanting to do that? That wasn't discussed before, was it? When we looked at this plan with them,
Yeah,
we were looking at the numbers and
yeah.
we just talked about moving that.
We've extended it before. So
Yeah,
it's-
we've extended it
Yeah.
several times, yeah.
Yeah.
We've always the numbers always projected that sales tax would go through the full CID, the full 22 years of the CID. Those were the numbers we always looked at with the developers,
But
when we
that
did the
was-
budget.
based on timely completion of the project, right? I mean, they agreed to that January 2019 date. So is there a reason to take their feet away from the fire and bump the date?
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Well, in the development agreement, the real clawback, if you will, was that October 31st date.
Right.
That's when they had to begin construction.
But this is another one that would incentivize moving quickly so that they can take full advantage of the 22-year
Yeah,
period, right?
It'll take 2 years to build those apartment buildings.
But they knew that when they agreed to the date originally.
You know, I don't know, I think this is more of a target date, than anybody actually agreed to. It may have been a date that was established when we moved, if you remember, we actually demolished the first 2 CID districts, and we created a 3rd CI district. So that might have been a target date that was established at that time, so.
But it's in the development agreement, that date, or where is
No,
that date
it's
found
in the-
separate CID?
It's in the establishment ordinance for the CID,
Okay.
it's not in the development agreement.
So Brian, if they're gonna go ahead and put in apartments, phase 1,
Right.
with retail underneath, and what if they don't lease any of that retail? Can they come back then and ask us again to,
Well, they can always come back and ask, and we can always say yes or no. So,
all right, that makes sense,
yeah.
okay.
I think it would be to their advantage to want to lease it because they want to get the revenue in from the leases as well as the sales tax.
I guess I'm still unclear about what we're short ourselves in terms of timeline.
Well,
At the end of it,
if you decide not to accept their consideration of moving,
Yeah,
the clock would start January 1,
correct,
2019.
correct.
And
He's
so,
talking about on the back end.
I'm
Yeah,
talking about on the back end, so if you extend it, does it extend the whole period?
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So-
still a 22-year.
So it still is to our benefit to make it, to allow that extension.
It benefits the developer. Now, what is the benefit to the city? in
it doesn't really
extending it?
benefit the city though, it's not our sales tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't benefit or not benefit us,
Yeah.
except for keeping them on a timeline to complete the project, which is
Right.
in everyone's interest.
Yeah, but once the sales tax goes away, we're not receiving
Right.
anything in addition.
So what's the general sense of it?
Why aren't we receiving anything?
Which is-
We have a sales tax.
Yeah, the city sales
This
tax
is
is
the additional
9.65.
Right.
With adding the CID, it becomes 10.65. That additional 1% would go back to the developer to help pay for the development cost. At the end of the
It's
22-year
not the district,
period,
it's not the
it
district.
would go back down to 9.65. So that 1% is nothing that would go to the city. It would go to the developer.
So the only interest in the city in keeping the date would be keeping the project
Right.
pushing forward.
And that 9.65 is being split between the city and the developer as part of the TIF agreement, the redevelopment agreement.
When you are trying to set a date
Okay.
for a CID to go,
Yes.
and you're working with a $215 million project, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when something should start or when something should stop. If you set the date too far out in advance and you're ready to start building, it may delay the project. So you want to set it somewhat near reasonable with the idea that it will be adjusted as the project develops.
Can you explain it?
Yeah, okay.
Is there any other question from Brian at this point? Do you have a sense of what you want to do?
I think, given the history of the project, it should probably be not on
I
consent.
would say
but-
non-consent, definitely take it to council non-consent.
Okay.
What was the reasoning behind the amount in the extension? Just like the year in 6 months for the...
That's what they're gonna start.
Well, I know it's the new completion, but is there, I don't know.
They're not
I guess I was
gonna have
expecting
any
more.
sales tax Because there's not going to be any.
You're asking why isn't it gonna be ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll take 2 years for them to build those buildings. That's the timeline. So they start essentially October 2018 with construction. They should be finished ideally before October of 2020. So that's why we set it at July 1st of 2020. But January 2020 would still be too early. So they'd be asking for another extension.
So I think we got the sense of the group, here's what I can do it as regular agenda. And the next item of business is actually the adoption of traffic standard ordinance and the Uniform Public Offense Code to be in line with the code books for 2018. And Dan, Chief is not here, but Dan is, and we'll go ahead and.
Oh yeah, he told me this would be a quick one, but then I have to go do my research and found a little issue we need to discuss. So, you know, this is just our yearly adoption to make sure that our ordinances that we're enforcing line up with the state statute changes that go into effect. We take out those few ordinances that we decide that we want to make more stringent or to control speeds and things like that. So that was supposed to be the easy part. We're supposed to be done. Until I read in the packet, there was the league article under the editor's changes section. It has that they've, in the past, they've never had drug ordinances in the UPSC, which is why we've had our own ordinance under section 215. So they've this year added the drug sections to the Uniform Public Offense Code, which means that we will have 2 different ordinance sections that would relate to drugs.
How much do they differ?
Well, our current ordinance is a very broad in nature. It's just very straightforward, whereas the state statute that controls this somewhat requires a chemistry degree to be able to understand. But with the way that the legislature is changing the drug laws, in my opinion, and we haven't had the opportunity to speak with David Martin about this, which we're going to do tomorrow. But using the UPOC book might be better uniformity for the definitions. We'll have the definitions in place, and since those definitions change yearly with the, when the creative people create new drugs and just change one molecule that now makes one thing legal that was once illegal, this will always be current with the current language in the state statutes.
Yeah, should we have a process to repeal the duplicate code that exists already? Would that be part of what David would advise us?
Yeah, so we would probably bring back an ordinance, or the ordinance that's in your package would change a little bit to essentially rescind the existing city ordinance and refer back to what's in the book.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to know, because I'd actually asked for those new sections because I was curious what the change was. One thing I would like to know is how the punishment matches up, and are these stricter terms than what we have in our current code. I'd like to see some sort of, to the extent that there can be a side-by-side, and maybe they're too different to really tell, but.
Well, I think the judge would still set the fine schedule for the different ordinances. So that probably wouldn't change much. There are no mandated sentences in the UPOC section.
Okay.
And it falls, like I said, with the changes this year with the definition of marijuana and all the CBD and all those things that changed this year, And so this will probably keep us more up to date with the state statute changes.
So why would we have to rescind that, our ordinance? I mean, I understand that it's different, and they're worded different, but if you're adopting, and the ordinance says they've got it written. Why can't you have both? Because you said one broader, this one's more targeted, narrow, and
Well, this is still broad.
is
This just still, it just takes takes a little bit more understanding and the definitions. Our current ordinance doesn't give many definitions as to what things are, and whereas the state statutes always
there's
lead
no other
with
place
different.
where our ordinance and theirs read the same or similar.
I mean, ours is definitely easy, but
Let's get Dave's recommendation.
Yeah.
and go from
Yeah,
there.
that's what
You
I,
don't want to have two ordinances
Yeah.
essentially the same in the books, that gives you kind of a legal double jeopardy
That's
there.
what I was asking, if that's the problem.
So it's one or the other.
so is the recommendation that we go ahead and do this is adopt both of these codes, and that would be something that we would put not on consent agenda based on the discussion tonight,
Yeah, we could do that, we could have the chief
and then have
discuss it with
have
you.
the chief and maybe
Yeah.
have Dave
Yeah, I think that would.
take a look at what
I
we
agree.
need to do about rescinding the existing code.
We can have that, we can have that as a motion written up for this meeting, can't we?
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks,
You
guys.
Sam?
Good job.
Who's
Officer
recommending
Dan.
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay, the last item is really a surplus, disposal of surplus items that we have in various departments. This is, John, I'll let you go into the
Yeah, this is, we do this about once a quarter, maybe twice a year, where we identify items of surplus nature for disposal, for sale, typically of vehicles and equipment for sale, and other items that are kind of nominal, might be for disposal. Parks and Recreation Department has been kind of cleaning out the community center a little bit, and they found some computers and audio equipment that I think was probably a part of, I know they made some updates about a year or two ago to the audio equipment in the conference center. So my guess is they probably took this equipment out, set aside for a future surplus, and then when the opportunity came, it just slipped their minds. So what's on the list now are a number of older PCs and audio equipment from that change up like a few years ago. And
depreciated.
yeah, they're fully depreciated, and what we do with the computers is we have a firm that we use when we surplus computers. They come in and take the computer, they wipe the hard drive clean, and then they take out whatever valuable materials are in the computer in terms of copper, other elements, and they do the same with the audio equipment too.
They're beyond anything any of our schools could use.
Yeah,
Right?
that's what I was just gonna add.
Pretty dated technology.
So, any questions?
Consent.
Take it.
Consent? Okay, and I take it that the last item is the department updates, and since you didn't have one for the other committee, I assume you don't have one for us either.
No updates.
Dan's got an update.
So,
You have an update for the police
are
department?
there any other
Oh, yeah, we're just rolling along, doing well.
Any other issues from the committee?
Any new information on the animal control?
No, I know that Laura is still working on doing the updated agreement between between the recommendations from all the cities, and she was hoping to have that done here in the next week, I believe.
Are they gonna be able to do it with one agreement, or is she gonna have to do an agreement with each city?
Well, I think it went out to the group, to the consortium as a whole, to get feedback on the initial agreement, and those changes that are acceptable to the city are being developed into that new agreement.
I guess, John or Brian, do you want to talk at all about the issue of the Hodges barriers in terms of, no?
Because we told the public it was not.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I know, I just
Right.
wanted to know.
And I think
if was a
I think there
date.
were 2 people here monitoring the meeting to make sure it was not discussed, so.
All right. So, okay, I guess that concludes our agenda.
Perfect, look at that.
All right, I beat you.
Good job.